Hello?
Yo, Sue. I'm doing part two of the Diamond Ballroom with Ross tonight. Anything you want me to ask him?
Yeah, ask him if I left my purse there from the Vixen concert.
That was 40 years ago. I'm not hopeful that's going to be. I don't.
Yeah, but I left my favorite lip gloss in there.
I'll see what I can do. Hey, everybody. As promised, we've got part two of the Diamond Ballroom. And of course, our buddy Ross Wood has joined us again today. Ross, welcome in, bud.
Well, I'm glad we could do this again. There was a lot of stories untold.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, we got a lot of feedback on this episode, a lot of locals and some out of staters who said that they had been to a show there, Texas and I think Arkansas.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Not a far drive.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's dive back into it, man. We've been texting back and forth and try to get this thing scheduled. So let's make the most of it here and let's talk about the Diamond Ballroom.
Well, I was thinking we had hit a lot of important milestones during the course of its existence, starting in 1964. So what I really wanted to do to start off with and chronologically is go back. My very first meeting with a superstar, if you would, or a star in the music business was Buck Owens in 69, and we talked all about him. There's a litany of them in the early to mid 70s that I ran into with just short little comments or stories. And I'll start with
Ross. I got a note from a teacher. I think she was in Texas. I'm not sure. Who was cracking up at your Northmore Elementary show and tell story about not believing everybody hadn't
Mrs.
met
Roberts.
Buck
Did
Owens.
she know Mrs. Roberts, or did she's been through that?
No, she was just a listener and happened to have taught elementary school, and she thought that was just the best story. Like
Yeah.
a little second grade Ross had no idea that others didn't live that existence.
Right, exactly. It was pretty much oblivious to that. It was because my family never acted like they were big time or anything. So my grandfather dressed in dirty overalls and drove an older car, and it was dirty all the time. And when I asked him why he didn't dress up anymore as a lawyer, he said, because I did that for 30 or 40 years and I'm retired. So
That's a good story. So, hey, a quick background to everybody who may, it's been a few weeks since that aired and some haven't listened to it yet. Ross's family, his grandpa specifically, built and maintained a pretty famous, what do you call it? Dance club, nightclub,
right,
dance hall.
It was a dance hall and concert center, an entertainment place, club.
And
It had all
in
kinds
there,
of,
they had it.
yeah, it had all kinds
Go
of
ahead. I'm sorry.
monikers attached to it. So, but 64. I left actually early 90s is when I told you we had a fallout with my uncle, but
Right.
he maintained it.
So they had a big, famously large dance floor and a stage. They had live music. On the last episode, Ross went into really the nuts and bolts of the very early days, the Perry Band, and all the early days and the history of the place. This episode focuses on Ross's hands-on experiences there, the stories he had there, and Ross, take it, bud.
Okay, I'm going to start with 1970, 71, with number one song in the country. I told you we had a few artists who played there when their song was actually number one in the country, which is pretty cool because it draws a great crowd and they're in a good mood. And, they're willing to talk to some idiot kid and myself about their music and everything else. And in early 1971, I got to meet Lynn Anderson, who Billboard magazine has called her song, I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, in the top 50 of all time in country music. And Lynn Anderson was very nice. She was very cordial. And the one thing I remember about her when I met her that night was she had this beautiful canary yellow dress on and white boots all the way up to her knees. She looked like Barbara Eden, that type of style.
Oh, wow.
I Dream of Jeannie. And she's a very nice person. And she had some other big hits later. But that song was number one for 5 weeks. It started in December of 70 and went into 71. And that's when I saw her, was January of 71. Like I said, a very nice person. And it was a great show. I think she had 700 or 800 people. which is a big number. Like I said earlier, we'd hold 1,000. That's what the fire marshal was comfortable with. And when we didn't think the fire marshal would come by, we'd stretch it to 12 on some shows, which we could easily do because the floor was the size, 2/3 the size of a football field. That led into a really interesting guy. Later on that year, that summer, I met Freddie Hart. And for those of you who don't know, Freddie Hart had this fantastic crossover song called Easy Lovin'. But, but anyway, I met Freddie Hart. I got to tell you about him. He was 6'8", probably about 260, 270. And my dad was a big man. My dad was 6'2", 225. And he just towered over him and obviously me. And I met Freddie, and he had this wonderful grin. He was a very nice person. What made him interesting was, Scott, before he got in the music business, he was a karate instructor for the LA Police Department. So he had kind of like Eddie Money. You know, he was in New York City Police before he got popular with 2 Tickets to Paradise. So one of those deals. And he's sitting there telling us a story about it. And I thought that was just incredible. So the two fascinating people right there. And then we moved to Donna Fargo in early 72. I think she's the only person that ever came out there, Scott, that had 2 songs in the top 20 at the same time.
Cool.
She had Happiest Girl in the Whole USA. I don't know if you remember that song. And I
do not.
And she had Funny Face. And so she had 2 songs, and they were early 72. And she had both of them at the same time there. And I remember, we'd get this notation when it come out, we'd advertise on KLPR, which was a station back then, or KEBC. We'd advertise on these country stations, and they would utilize that. We'd get that from their marketing director before these concerts so they could give the general public feedback on why they need to come out. You know, so it's kind of an incentive. So anyway, we went to there, and she's a very nice person. I didn't talk to her very long from what I remember. She put on a very quick show also, but not as quick as Mel McDaniel, like we talked about earlier. But anyway, so I want to go to 72, and this involves my brother in a weird way. And you said, well, this is odd, but I'm going back to Buck Owens again, and it's the Buck Owens clan here. Buck Owens was like Rick James in one way, and I know, where's he going with this?
Hang on, I need to hear how Buck Owens was like Rick James.
Okay, Rick James had an entourage of people that had hits on their own that he traveled with. The Mary Jane Girls, In My House, and he also had Tina Marie, Lover Girl. And so Buck Owens had a guy named Doyle Holly that toured with him and also played in his band, and he had a couple of hits on his own. And he had a female named Susan Ray. Susan Ray had 2 or 3 top 40 hits. Susan Ray and I got really close, and they actually wrote letters to each other. And my mom, the only time ever my mom came out there was when she was pregnant, and Buck was out there in 72, and she got to meet Susan Ray. And this is like my second time talking to her. Now, my mom her and mom are sitting on the couch talking. I'll never forget this. Because Susan Ray comes out, does 2 or 3 songs. Doyle Holly does 2 or 3 songs. And then it's Buck Owens. You know how that goes. So she's talking to Susan Ray, and my mom's asking her what she's going to name the baby. And my mom, we find out, which I didn't even know at this time, was pregnant. And Susan Ray said she's got 2 choices. They're deciding between Cale, because she's auto racing fan, Cale Yarborough, or Clayton. And she got inspired by the song Clayton Delaney by Tom T. Hall. So my mom, I remember coming home and all that, and she says, I like that name Clayton that she suggested. And then my dad says, well, I have a Clayton in my family that was a great uncle. So anyway, that's how my brother got his name. So I thought I would hit you with this, and you can remind him of it. Well, then right after that, Buck Owens wanted to keep a female, and this is just off the top of my head here, got a woman named Jana Jay, who was a fiddle player, and Buck was enamored with her. They got married. They got an annulment in a week. But she used to do these commercials for something, and I don't remember. She's this hellacious fiddle player. So all these
You
names,
can't tame that. You can't tame that Buck Owens beard.
right? He likes to get, he always gets a tiger by the tail, I tell you. But so anyway, but you got to look up these names and all that. It's really cool.
Yeah, I will. Hey, Ross, real quick, let me review here. Guys, we jumped right into this tonight because there is a part one where Ross goes into the details of his family and how they established the diamond and the early days of it in the history. And so we just jumped right into the stories. And so if you want to catch up, go check that last episode out. I'll link it to this one. And we're just spending the night with Ross, and he's giving us the goods from the inside.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified all that for everybody, because it'd be like, what the hell did this guy do? Just, show up at a business, right?
Right.
Sneak in the back door or something. But anyway,
right.
so...
Yeah, this guy had a pass.
So in 1974, I met Mel Tillis. You're going to like this story. And I got to tell you, I have tried to find this item, and you're going to know what I'm talking about here in a minute. I've tried and tried and tried on YouTube, and this is a true story. I met Mel Tillis in 1974 when he came out there, and he was on his way to L.A. touring, and was going to be on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson at about, Tuesday or Wednesday of that following week, maybe Thursday. But we talked a long time, and he's a very nice person, and the stuttering deal is real. It's not an act or anything like that. It's real. And I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he stutters, but he doesn't stutter when he's...
I was first initiated when he and Terry Bradshaw took that stock car and crashed it into the pool on Cannonball Run.
What was it? A Cannonball Run. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Burt Reynolds just picked out the weirdest, most odd people for that show. At least they had Adrienne Barbeau in it. So that was important, right? Keep us abreast of everything.
Yes,
but anyway,
exactly.
so Mel Tillis, this is well before Cannonball though, but he still had a couple hits like Dream of Me and those. And he was very nice. And he said, I'm going to tonight. I said, I love Johnny Carson. And I did stay up and watch. So Mel Tillis says, I'm going to say hi to you on national television to Johnny. And all right, cool. And I bragged to my mom. And my mom goes, now listen, when he doesn't say hello, don't get mad. I thought he'd be like, I got to say hi to my friend Ross. It was just in his head the whole time. And like I was telling you about the gullibility of somebody young. So I'm watching it. It's Wednesday or Thursday night. It's 4 or 5 days afterwards. And he stops Johnny in the middle and says, I want to say hi to my buddy back in Oklahoma City, Ross. Hope you're still out in waves.
I would have videotaped that and played that on a loop for any girlfriend that ever came to my house. Oh, yeah, me and Mel.
Well, that would have been an anachronism because we didn't have any tape stuff then in 1974.
Oh, 1974. That's right. God, Fred Flintstone, you dinosaur.
Right. So I've got on YouTube, I don't know how many times to try and find, and I can find him performing on there. He must have been on Carson 8 or 10 times. But that's why we watch it periodically, those reruns. But because if I know he's doing a monologue on Nixon, I got a shot there, right? So because it's 1974.
I have at Ross. I have people that text me, that send notes through Facebook, who nitpick anything about this show, and they try to catch me, which is fine. I love the accuracy, and a lot of this stuff is about the Reagan years, 40 years ago.
Amen.
45. And so any kind of update or any check anybody can give me, I always welcome it. I know there's somebody out there I'll find it, and more power to you. Send it to me. I'll send it over to Ross.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Next thing I got to get to the Jerry Jeff Walker story. And this is something I could have done last time because I was thinking of him. And I went ahead and went to David Allan Coe. And it was a natural process. You know what I mean? It was a natural grow to there because of the fact that the two of them are very similar. And I said,
hey, Ross, let me interject something here. Speaking of notes that I've gotten from listeners, Somebody wrote in and said that Coe did need that cane. He was born with some kind of congenital thing, his leg or something. I'm not sure, but
Really?
he used that cane his whole life.
Really? Because he was walking really well. He must have been jazzed up or something, but he was walking really well. It looked like he was about to go into putting on the Ritz or something with it. So, I mean, it was like, he was,
No, that wasn't a prop, man. He used that, it said, most of his life.
Wow. Okay. Well, I believe it. And I mean, he didn't have white gloves on or anything, but he did have a derby hat on and a black vest.
Spats.
Right. Dress up like $1 million trooper. But anyway, so he was, I'll go back to him. Jerry Jeff Walker is a outlaw country singer. And I sent you a song of his. Did you see that?
Yes, I watched the whole thing.
Okay, so you understand what kind of mentality we're dealing with.
I do.
Okay, so we have him in 1976. I was not there this night. My grandfather told me the story, and our bouncers. My grandfather did not anticipate he had early ticket sales, right? He learned a really good lesson from this, he told me. He had these early ticket sales, and he sold like about 200 of them. Now, normally, ticket sales is a third of the walk-up, is what he told me, or half. So he's expecting 500 or 600, and he hired about 5 bouncers for 500 or 600, usually 1 per 100 is what he would do. Plus him and some bartenders could help out, or my dad if something was necessary. But what happened was we had a walk-up crowd of about 1,000 people, and they all came from the same place where David Allan Coe people come from. And so what happened was he went ahead and he got about 1,000, 1,050 in there. And there was 50 to 60 people that we couldn't let in. And these aren't the kind of people you would see at, Swan Lake. So they weren't like thinking, oh, shucks, we won't have to buy our tickets early next time.
Swan Lake.
So they started to bang on the windows and tried to pull the door up. And we had a door guy, and they pulled it away from him. And 2 or 3 guys got inside the door, and my grandfather's standing there with our best bouncer. My best bouncer was named Carl. Carl looked like Santa Claus, but he was 6'5" and about 280 pounds. And he had an eye that went crossways when he drank. So when he yelled with that eye like that, that would scare the hell out of anybody.
Yeah.
So anyway, he's standing there, and they're threatening to crash the door and come in and crash. A couple of them have bricks in their hand or heavy rocks. They're going to throw it through the windows. All this, it's getting way out of hand, okay? Like I told you, the David Allan Coe, like half of them had warrants, right, in that night. The Jerry Jeff Walker crowd, I think they were out on leave from prison. So this was like even worse, he told me. So furloughed, right? They're all furloughed. And so, or the Dukakis program where they get 2 days off from the week and come back. But so he's out there. They're out there under the mezzanine there, about to break it down. And Carl, he yells out and points at him. He said, the 40 or 50 of you may get through me. He said, but the first 2 or 3, I'm going to put in the grave. I'm going to hit you in the face and put in the grave. He said, if you want to test me, go ahead. And
Lord,
he added some emphatic words to that. So my grandfather told me, years after, that Carl saved a lot of problems that night, because he was like, I'll take on the whole 40 or 50 of you. Nobody wanted that risk, right? Nobody wanted to be the leader of that, the hero. And
hey, pal, it's the diamond. It's a diamond. You're not protecting the Pope here.
Right.
I'll bet you are the only person to ever tell a Jerry Jeff Walker story and incorporate Willie Horton.
Well, I made a reference to Dukakis's, game plan of letting people out of prison for the weekend. Right. I don't, that wouldn't, Michael Dukakis. Anyway, this is a music show.
Right.
So let's kind of segue and go up into the 80s here. if you're ready. And we'll go into the metal movement because we talked about Urban Cowboy, which was really a movement from about 80 to 83.
Look, full confession, most of my listeners and the guy you're talking to tonight has been waiting for the 80s metal. Let's go.
Okay, awesome. I'll tell you how it all materialized. We're sitting there in 1984, and it's late 84. And like I told you before, by 83, 84, the oil boom has gone bust, and our crowds have been decimated. So our place is so big that my grandfather put up a curtain that went across the middle of the floor when we were having between 50 and 100 people. And this was country. And, we were getting eaten alive. You had the thing that got it all going in 82 was the Penn Square Bank closing down all of a sudden. And then we had just a domino effect of things shutting down, the oil business going bust. And that hurt us too. I mean, we were part of the effect. But
hey, Ross, we're building the show to be more broad in scope and outside of Oklahoma. And you mentioned Penn Square. You got to talk about Linda Soundtrack next?
Okay. But it was a national story.
Yeah, it sure was. You're right about that.
But the Penn Square Bank was a bank that had a lot of loans and investments in real estate and oil. It went under, and they overvalued everything. So they went under with their customers. But anyway, so let's get to 84. We're sitting there talking one day about what to do. And this guy comes in, and he wants a place. He's got an idea. And he was a member of a group called Power Lord. And Power Lord's a very famous local metal band here in the mid-'80s, early 90s. And he came in with an idea. This was right around Christmas. And let's do some local metal, and starts bantering it around with my uncle. And my grandfather's not really ready to do this, not really ready to make that leap. But as Ralph starts to take over in 85, and then officially in 86, this is one of Ralph's pets. This is one of Ralph's projects that he really wants. So Ralph's idea, along with a group called Ibex, guy from Ibex, and they get together, and Ibex and Power Lord are good friends. And
I remember their flyers all over my school.
Yeah, a guy named Robin, I don't remember his last name, but he had a big light show, and it was his, and he had a soundboard and all that. He had all the equipment. And so what he did was he'll set up, we'll bring in bands in there, and they give him a piece of their money, what they make there. So we started having metal shows in 86. And what it was on Thursday nights, all night long, from 7 to 1, we'd have 3 or 4 different bands. And I would play in between. My dad was still healthy then, but my dad didn't want anything to do with it. And he worked 2 jobs, and he said, I'll let you. And that's when I first started DJing, was the metal shows in 86, when I started playing in the breaks while the band changed their equipment and everything on stage. And I'd play 15, 20 minutes, right? And I started playing metal stuff, or what I, interpreted as metal.
Sure.
Right. I threw in a lot of classic rock. So it was like, okay, right. I threw in Uriah Heep and Deep Purple and things of that nature, and Foghat. So that was my interpretation of it, which I loved.
I think you can make a case for Deep Purple being early days of metal.
True. I think a lot of metal purists will tell you that the very first metal song that they really thought or classified was Paranoid by Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
I think that's usually...
Well, I think Steppenwolf had a song where they mentioned heavy metal for the first time. It was ever a term.
Born to be Wild.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're getting all this together, and you know what? I didn't really have a lot of faith in this, but what happened was these guys were so hungry to do this. We have a lot of musicians around town. Some of the bands were complete garbage, and some of them were pretty good. And if you got a really good show, you had Ibex headlining that night, or Power Lord, after all these 3. They did this, and Ibex would headline one night, and we'd have 2 or 3 from around the city. After that, we started getting metal shows. We got Stryper in there one night. We got Oliver Magnum, which was real popular around the Southwest United States. We got all of them in there, and that was a good show. And it got to where it got us to the early 90s, where we got into Pantera and all of that. So the metal days were so good on so many levels. I picked the wrong time to start dressing in a tie and suspenders and dress because the women who came out there during that time were the hottest we've ever had. What I will say for metal girls during that time period was the makeup, the hair, and the outfits were off the charts sexy.
Didn't their hair violate some kind of fire code, though?
Well, probably because of the hairspray.
Just the gallons of hairspray and then how big they were, like, that's its own problem.
Well, you know what? A lot of it, and the makeup and stuff too, it would be like if goth girls cared about deodorant. So it would be like if and they were like really, really attractive, and they had the dark lipstick, some of them, and they had the pink ones and the ripped jeans and the wild hair, and it was just, and part of it was the show, right? Part of it was the exterior, right? And just somehow metal shows, metal girls knew where to push everything, knew where to lift everything, knew where to wrap everything, right?
I remember, Russ.
Knew where to put all the right cuts in the jeans, and they knew how to do all that stuff, right? And I'm not taking away anything from the Cowgirls because they had a gorgeous bunch of those, but just metal night, it was like, to a girl, there was just like, oh man, it was like walking down the hallways at Moore High School in the 80s. Again, how pretty everybody was. But
done that too.
Yeah. So anyway, that part of it was great too. I got zero attention and zero action because I was the man, right? I was the man that everybody was fighting against. I was the Reagan guy, right? I was Mr. Square.
Yeah, you were the surfer blonde dude dressed like Urkel.
Right. And exactly. And so I did not look the part of what a metal chick wanted. So I was avoided like the police in there, the way I dressed at that point.
Live and learn.
Too bad it wasn't like 98 or something for me. But anyway, so
so in the early days, Ross, the early days of having the attention at least turn to metal, was it more profitable for the club? Like, did you guys realize more at the end of the night?
The great thing about it was profitable because the only problem was we couldn't sell a lot of beer because there wasn't a lot of people at that time that could drink of legal age. So we sold a ton of Coke and a ton of snacks, and a lot of people came in to see their friends and all that and would pay $5, $10. And the bands didn't want that much money. They just wanted to perform for people. And so, you're giving these bands with 4 people like $100,
Well, when I saw Pantera there, I was 14, like you said, so we weren't drinking. But like their merch table was like a couple of TV trays.
Right. Exactly. But they had already had an album that was about to just skyrocket off the out into the stratosphere, which is a huge album.
Yeah, I think we talked about this before. I saw them before then when they were all glammed up and just looked like an ugly version of Poison.
Yeah, they did. I looked up the pictures afterwards after you said that. So
yeah.
But anyway, just getting out of that and working its way out of that and getting out of the metal grind there, that stayed in and around the Diamond until it's still there. Okay. It still permeates its way through the vapors of that place. All right.
So I hate to put you on the spot here, but a lot of things we had, if people remember from the first episode where you were on, we had some pretty bad audio in a couple of spots. So a couple of things that were cut. Ross, again, I'm putting you on the spot here, but do you mind telling the Megadeth story, and then from there, man, just hit all the metal guys you remember?
Okay, the Megadeth story was fun as all get out because my brother is on a road trip with my cousin Russell to Florida, and we have Megadeth out there, and he misses it. So I make it a point, and before I get to this, I will tell you about the crowd we had. That's one of those where we let 1,200 in, and it was absolutely jam-packed, and I think it was right during or right before Peace Sells But Who's Buying album.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because this is 1991, I think. But anyway.
No, that would have been their peak, man. That was the euthanasia days or the countdown.
Well, it was 91 because it was a year after MC Hammer, and there's a reason why I mentioned Hammer, as you know, coming up.
So it's it's right before they hit big with the countdown album.
Okay. But anyway, so I'm going in there that night and I'm like, it's ho-hum for me. I just, I know it's going to be good as far as musicianship, but I walk in and they're rehearsing. This is what a professional, this Dave Mustaine is. It's 10 minutes from opening and they're rehearsing on stage. And it's the tightest sound I've ever heard out there from any band ever. Their music. I don't like metal, but man, it was so good. It was so good it almost sounded like classical. And it was just so tight and so good. All of a sudden, he stops and gripes at his guitarist, this guy with dark hair, and Clay knew his name, and he just ripped into him about when he comes in on a certain part and just says all kinds of curse words, just angry, right? You keep missing this, and then goes, you this and that and the other, and, bringing God into it and everything else. So, anyway, so he, and I thought that sounded fantastic to me, right? But not to Dave Mustaine. So I'm going to color Dave Mustaine in this story good and bad, because that's what he is. They put on this show, and I'm the DJ as well, and I'm in the middle of the Diamond. We've moved the DJ stand in 1990 in the middle of the Diamond, and I can see in front of me all up and down the floor, and there's the lights go on. It's the best light show we ever had in there, too. And I see all the way down to the South Bar, and the floor is packed, just all the way down. First time I ever saw that. And he's doing these parts in a song where everybody has their hand in the air, like making a fist and going at the same time rhythmically. And it was wild to see with the bass in the drum, boom, 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 boom. They're all doing their hands like that to the song because they all knew it, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm very impressed here. So here's the part about it that sucked. It was in July. So 1,200 people in there in July, and it's 100 million degrees inside there, and I have to go outside periodically. And we run out of beer, too, on that show, and we have to bring somebody in by 11. We made a ton of money and all that, but after the show, I said, I'm going to go try and go backstage and meet Dave Mustaine because it would really piss my brother off, right, if I met him. And so I didn't have to go backstage because Dave Mustaine was wrapping up chord on his own right out in front of the stage after everybody had left. And
that is so on brand for that. He's a worker. He always has been.
And he's pulling up tape where they taped and I went over and I said, Dave Mustaine. And he looked up and this guy's 6'1", built like a skeleton, and pale with just freckles everywhere. I'll never forget that. And I shook his hand, and I said, I got to tell you something. My brother's a huge fan of yours. I said, but I like you because of what you said at the American Music Awards a few months ago, about 6 months ago. And MC Hammer was winning everything. He was winning Best New Artist, Best Album, Best Song, right? Can't touch this. You remember those days, Scott?
Yeah.
Okay, so every time it was always MC Hammer, and he had his entourage, and right, and God was to thank, and everything else. And so they get up, him and Lita Ford get up and do Best New Female Metal Vocalist. And they name off, and I think they even threw in Atlanta Miles or something. But they're reading them off, and she's starting to open it. Lita Ford is, and she goes, the winner is, and Dave Mustaine goes, MC Hammer. It was like crickets. And I was laughing my ass off at home. I thought that was hilarious. So I brought that up to him. I said, I loved you saying that. That was hilarious. I told my brother, I said, hey, I met Dave Mustaine. You what? He had to because I think he knew they were coming, but it was like, he probably think I wouldn't even go to work that night or something, right? He goes, you what? You real deadpan? I said, I met Dave Mustaine, right? He goes, why? And I said, because I wanted to piss you off. I said, and I goes, you may not ever meet him, and I have, and it doesn't mean anything to me. I said, except for the fact that he's an unusual person. He's a very unusual person, sending mixed signals like that, using that kind of lingo, and then he's out helping the band roll up stuff, and then he puts on a great show, and then he chastises his guitarist, and I mean, he's quite an unusual individual, and he's a conservative voter, and it's like, okay, these guys are wild.
Hey, that guitarist was Marty Friedman, by the way. He is a stud. That guy can play.
Dark hair, right? Long dark hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's one who he was bitching at. Well,
another thing about Mustaine is he has really turned it around. To hear him in an interview now, he is so calm, and he has found himself some religion, and
good.
He has really mellowed. Matter of fact, there used to be a show on VH1 or VH1 Classic that was called That Metal Show with Eddie Trunk.
I remember him.
And he interviewed him. Yeah. And he kept trying to goad him into saying bad things about Metallica. And there's plenty of bad blood there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Dude just flat out wouldn't do it. Like he seems like he's really got some peace now. So that's good to see.
Well, good. And that was a fun story. And I'm glad I could enlighten everybody on that. And that was an incredible night. So, the great thing about bringing him out there was I got to run the scope of a lot of different genres of music and the people who perform them over the years, Conway and Buck Owens and him, and even meeting people like Hank Thompson and people like that who were great during their day. And Ernest Tubb, I met Ernest Tubb, walking the floor over you, and even met John Ritter's dad, Tex Ritter.
Oh, Tex.
Yeah. And so anyway, it was a cornucopia of people that is just, you could mark and go, wow, that's wild. That's different. And one real interesting one, in 1988, I was married for the first time mistakenly. And we were sitting there at the bar, and we had this show come in, and the Oklahoma Opry used to bring in people and that they were trying to promote and make big, right? And we'd have 100, 200 people for these. And it was mainly kind of a scratch your back, I scratch mine corporate sponsorship deal. And that's how they'd get these people in there. And they'd have somebody open up for them. Well, they had this girl, I don't even remember her name, and she wasn't any good. But the opening act guy was really good. And he comes over to the bar before the show, and I'm setting up a name here for you. I'm name dropping again like David Allen Coe. Anyway, so he comes up to the bar, tall, blonde, long hair, mustache, cowboy hat, about 6'4", incredibly well-mannered and nice. Wants to have a Dr. Pepper, and I give it to him. I said, no, the drinks, he starts to pay, and I said, the drinks are free, okay, for the talents, free, always has been. And he said, well, thank you, I appreciate that, but I pay for everything. And he paid for it and gave $1 tip. And I started talking.
6'4" blonde. Who is that? Alan Jackson?
Alan Jackson.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to him, and my wife, ex-wife, make sure I say that, sitting at the end of the bar, and I say, come down here and meet. I wave. And she's like, tries to give me the French wave, right? And I said, no, come down here. And I had her meet him, and she goes, why'd you do that? I said, because you never know. It's not like I had a gut feeling. I was just like, you never know, right? And he was a nice person. Well, about 6 or 8 months later, out comes Chattahoochee. Yeah. And I'm sitting on the radio one day and listening, and they go, here's the new breakthrough song, with Alan Jackson. I went, Alan Jackson? I said, no way. So you go back then, you couldn't look it up on the internet, right? Because that would have been an anachronism, 1988. So I go to like the local record store, Sound Warehouse or something, and look at his picture, and there it is. And I'm like, and I showed my ex-wife. I said, this is why you meet people and why you're nice to people. And on every one of his little reels, because he's going through health problems right now, and this is his last tour. And I always make sure and tell that story on every one of them so everybody will know that he got a free drink. He wanted to pay for it. And not only that,
he never said hello to you on the Tonight Show, so who cares?
Well, that would have been Jay Leno by then, so he probably wouldn't have allowed it.
I'm going to send my sister a link to this show. Alan Jackson, sorry, Ross. Alan Jackson's the only blonde dude I've ever heard her say was attractive.
Well, he is too in person. It was more strawberry blonde from what I remember in person, but he had that hair back behind his ears, and he had a cowboy hat on, and he was, I remember, 6'4", 6'3", 6'4", and real slim, incredibly well-mannered, and he like leaned down on the bar, and we talked a little bit about what he's doing and where he's from and everything else. I think he's from Georgia. I'm not sure. And we were just talking about that, and he actually did mention that he was thinking about opening up here for Keith Whitley, who I think, by the way, is one of the best voices. And the song I'm No Stranger to the Rain is one of the greatest songs of all time. The lyrics, it's just magnificent. So had Keith Whitley lived, I don't going off on this tangent, but I wish I could have met or seen him play. That would have been fantastic.
You're right about Alan Jackson. He is from Newton, Georgia, the home of Louis Grizzard.
Oh, okay. So I had a good memory there. I think he just mentioned that to me. But anyway, so he was a very nice person. And I always try and tell people that, especially on his last tour. I want him to know that story. It's small in nature. It's no big deal, right? It's innocuous. But, I mean, it just kind of goes to the fabric of what the guy is.
That's good. All right, so Ross, you teased us with a couple of other funny stories, but you're not getting out of here before the Danzig story.
Okay, I'm doing Danzig here. I got two.
Yeah, okay. Hey, here's the deal. Last episode, we trailed that one off because...
I heard it. He is a... Yeah, so... yeah, I'll tell that story here in a minute, but I got one right before then that's just great. And this involves a guy. Ralph comes up and tells me, my uncle, and this happened right around today, 1990. This would have been 35 years ago. My God. But anyway, so he tells me, I got this guy that wants to play out here, and he used to be the original bassist, the studio bassist, when he was 17 or 18 years old for Wild Cherry. And they had the song Play That Funky Music. And he said he was the bassist in the band. Now, I never got that verified, but that's such an unusual, odd reference point. If you're going to lie about something, that's probably really good one. But so he didn't tour with them, but he played it in the studio for them. He's 17, 18 years old. And his name was Jet Star. And he was very cocky, okay? And he came in and talked to us, and he booked his show 2 weeks in advance. We had it in mid-January of 1990. Now, as I've told you before, like with the Fats Domino story, booking stuff in the winter is a roll of the dice, almost anywhere in the country. And so he told Ralph. Ralph said, I'll give you this. I pay new people this, and and I get the door, and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, oh, no. I don't want anything up front. I get like 80% of the door. That's what I do, or 70. but I get no money up front. I want like 70% of the door. Okay. And he had a 4-piece with him, his metal show. And, well, we wanted to go ahead and cancel it because, weathermen can be right sometimes. And we saw 3 or 4 days out, it didn't look good. Well, that night, it's mid-January, and it's about 7 to 10 inches of snow started that afternoon and into that night. And he didn't want to cancel it. And because he goes, my crowd's faithful, Ralph. He just kept saying weird stuff like this. And so we had about 30 people. And it was so bad, my uncle had to shut the curtain during the night. Because watching 30 people walk around in the Diamond with no curtain being closed, right? You can start hearing Hugh Montenegro in the background, that music, the good, the bad, and the
You're going to
ugly.
get a clown sweeping off stage soon.
Right. It's very desolate, right? And there's going to be like a gunfight somewhere. But anyway, so tumbleweeds blowing across the floor. But so he shuts it off in the middle of it. And at the end of the show, Ralph goes, it's like $10 a ticket, right? Like, here's your 70%, $175. He would have gotten a guaranteed, I think, 7 or 8. Ralph would have been out the yin yang. It would have been a bad deal for us. But because we got nothing at the concessions and whatever. We weren't serving coffee and hot chocolate, but it was like, so he starts following Ralph around. He wants to renew the deal, ipso facto, right? After the show's over. And he's walking around. I'll never forget the line he said, because I laughed in front of him, and Ralph tried to get onto me, and then he started laughing. Guy's following him around, and he's got running mascara down his face, right? He looks like Pagliacci or something, and he's got it running down his face, right? And you're right, like when Pagliacci sings the Ballad of Netta, and he's crying. And he's got all this stuff running down his face, and he's chasing Ralph around, wanting more money. And Ralph said, I already talked to you about it twice, right? This was your deal. This is the contract. And Ralph's is like waving the contract in front of him.
Dad.
And he's going, but Ralph, you don't understand. I'm a businessman. And when he said that, I lost it, because I grew up in a family where a businessman's like a tie, and right, and you're sitting behind a desk, and you're right, you look like you're about to close the deal,
running mascara.
On something. Or no running mascara and matted long hair up against your wild-looking shirt and leather pants, and sweat everywhere, and because he had these massive lights, and he just sweat the whole show. And he goes, but I'm a businessman. And I lost it at that moment, because the night was gone anyway. It was done. It's one of those nights you wish you could write off. You don't want to drive home and everything else. And it was a funny moment, right? You had to laugh because it was such a disaster. And he's trying to tell Ralph he's a businessman, and he looks, like I said, the sad clown chasing Ralph
What year was
around.
that?
But 1990.
Oh, wow.
So let's get to Danzig. I got Danzig in one more story. Rob Danzig, we had Danzig out there, and it already had to hit Mother, I think.
Glenn
Danzig. Glenn Danzig. And he looked exactly like he always does. He's a very muscular guy, about my height. He had blue jeans on and boots and a black mesh tank top, and he liked his body, which is fine. And because every time he'd sing, he'd never he would sing like Engelbert Humperdinck or something. He would hold the mic up real close with his arms up against his lap, so he could squeeze, those
Did
biceps
he have his
and
goat
triceps.
belt buckle? Or the goat skull? Yeah, I know the black mesh, dude. That's the Mother video look.
Yeah, well, he had that.
God.
He's a good-looking guy, too, physically. He's a good-looking guy. He's a good-looking man. He's, I'm not gay or anything, not that there's anything wrong with it, but, I mean, he doesn't have, Seinfeld, but he doesn't have a lot of elegance to him. And
Hang on,
so
you're telling me former lead singer of the Misfits, Glenn Danzig, isn't an elegant man?
right. When I said he sings like Engelbert Humperdinck, I mean the way he kept his arms in. He certainly didn't sound like him. Uh, anyway, so he's singing, and one of our guys, one of the things we've always done out there since Ralph took over, Ralph tapes everything. He tapes everything during the night, and that's fine. You can do that legally as long as you don't try and sell anything. Or he could not put it on the computer now or Facebook without permission from the band. So we taped it for insurance reasons, safety reasons how we can do stuff better, and in general, just to capture the ambiance.
You don't have to tell me why
right?
you would film a Danzig crowd. Like, of course, like they're coming
Right.
for. Hey, we need evidence of this stabbing. Which one?
Yeah, right. There's more stabbings at a Danzig concert than Woodstock, right? I get that. But so anyway, so we had a guy named Scott. His name was Scott too, a young guy. He filmed everything. That was his job. He did pictures during the night, and then he filmed for 2 hours. Sweet gig, and a really expensive camera. So he comes back and tells Ralph. He says Danzig took the camera and they took it back into the bus, and they won't give it back. So Ralph has to go in there with a bouncer, and he confronts Rob Danzig and says, either give us the camera back or you're not getting paid. Right?
Yeah.
And
sure.
And so they had a few words, and he did. And he goes, well, I'm taking the tape. And he goes, Ralph says, you take the tape and give me the camera back. You don't get paid. Everything intact back. Right? And another thing I loved, I told you the story about my grandfather with Emmylou Harris.
So hang on, what's his rationale for having the tape?
He said he was worried about us bootlegging or something like that. And Ralph explained to him, he understood why his concerns was valid, on the surface. But once he explained it to him, he should, acquiesce and give the thing back. Correct? So he didn't. He had much reluctance and wouldn't do it. So Ralph gave him an ultimatum. And I was just thinking about that story, like I told you about my grandfather with Emmylou Harris, that, he didn't acquiesce to her demands when she came in and wanted to play. And Ralph did the same thing. The great thing about my family in that regard, like I told you, that I got taught, just because these people are well known, they don't get their way if it goes against any sort of protocol that is advantageous to the Diamond. So you're not going to get this, this little childish venue that you walk down, right? That you think you own this, or your rights to this and your rights to that. And that's just not true. And he stood up, got it back, got the deal back. But Ralph was like, I'm never having those again, So,
well, they're never going to have another hit again. So, good, it's going to work out.
But let me tell you the final story. And this is so funny.
Hey, guys, real quick, that Ross is calling back to the earlier episode with the Emmylou Harris story. Again, check that one out in concert with this one. It ties the two together pretty well.
Right. No offense against both of them. I love Emmylou Harris's music, but, my grandfather did the right thing in that regard, not booking her. But so anyway, this is a story. We had an Elvis impersonator that I found out later was pretty well known around town. So I got to tell you from the beginning, we're sitting there and Ralph comes over to me, and I'm sitting at the table. We both had our dogs then, and this is important here. Ralph had his dog and I had my dog. They were sisters. And my dog was Allie, his was Jessie. And he sits down and tells me, we're out there working during the day, that this guy's coming out to discuss. And he goes, this is a new one, so get ready. He says he's an Elvis impersonator. And I said, okay, I'm game for anything, right? We've gone through metal and David Allan Coe and all this stuff. Here comes an Elvis impersonator. And my thought of it was, I'd see like those Vegas shows or something. I said, that might be pretty fun. You'd get a lot of older women in here. I mean, I'm thinking way above board what this guy was. It'd be like, hey, we're getting a really good singer into our club tonight, and it ends up being Bill Murray from SNL and those skits. So,
Star Wars.
right. So he walks in, and I don't know what I was thinking, what it would look like. But he walks in, it's in the summertime. This guy's walking in, and it's Elvis. And it's Elvis with the jet black hair. And it's Elvis with the shades. And it's Elvis with the black leather jacket. And it's Elvis with the motorcycle boots and the blue jeans. And it's Elvis with the white T-shirt. I mean,
So it's Elvis. Is it Elvis Jailhouse Rock or Comeback Special or
it's
Jumpsuit?
both. It's both. It's Jailhouse Rock. It's King Creole. It's the '68 special, which, by the way, one of the best live performances of all time. But anyway,
so good.
Anyway, so he comes walking, and he's got a valet with him, a white guy, a young, old white man. Anyway, so this is so funny. I start laughing when I think about him. I'm not going to say his name, okay, because these stories aren't flattering, and he could hear this. And so he comes and sits down. I bet people would know what I'm talking about, by the way. But he comes and sits down, and I'm thinking, we're going to have a good conversation. We can banter this around. So before he sits down, he does the shimmy, right?
Ugh.
He does the shimmy and takes his glasses off, and he goes, "Hello, Ralph. Nice to meet you." I mean, just like that.
Oh, Lord. He's like a method actor.
Right. So Ralph's dog comes up and licks on him, and he pets him, and Ralph goes, "Get away, Jesse." And he goes, "That's all right, Ralph. I love little dogs." He says, and I can tell it's still so funny to me. Okay. I'm in total bewilderment.
So this guy pre-show is talking to the owner.
Right, that's Ralph.
You know, you're the hired gun there, and he, as Elvis.
Well, yeah, he as Elvis, and as Elvis,
Lord.
as Elvis doing an interview as Elvis from 1977 or something. Except he was in good shape, so we'll go 68. So he sits down and we start talking about what to do. Now, what he is saying and what's eventually going to happen is not the same thing, because Ralph and I both are picturing, hey, this might be a good idea. And by the way, to his credit, he does look like him. And by the way, I have a follow-up to this story that you're not going to believe.
That's part of the equation, looking like him.
Yeah, but he does look like him, and he does sound like him, but it's creepy. And the white guy with him is his valet, and he's even creepier, and I'll tell you in just a minute. So he's kind of living vicariously through him and living around him, and I don't know what sort of, groupie thing it would be going on here, but he starts talking about what he wants to do, and he does these songs, and he never once says it's on tape, ever. And I'm thinking,
oh no,
2 or 3 in the band with a horn, right, and a piano, Burning Love, right? I'm thinking Burning Love, right?
Yeah,
because that's the predominant Elvis impersonator song.
Or Suspicious Minds.
Yeah, that's a good one. Or Dixieland Trilogy. But
yeah,
so,
if you've got the horns, do it, man. Do some trilogy.
You'll see, that's what I was thinking. That's what Ralph was thinking. So he comes in, and here's what we decided on. Like I said, what he was spitting out was not the eventual reality here. So we're bought into this. He didn't want any money. He just wanted to give us a preview, and then we can do it later. And I'm like, okay, like eating, a free something off a toothpick at grocery store. And I'm like, hey, okay, right? Free sample. So the deal was he'll come out during a regular show, and I'm going to give up my 20 minutes, that I have in between band when they rest to play. And I said, I'll do this because I want to see it. I'm picturing, 3 or 4 guys coming in with him with a guitar and, because they're not going to be able to use the people's stuff on stage. And we just anticipated he'd bring in a couple of guys with the guitars and do some stuff like 68 Elvis. And no, it was him and the white guy again, his valet. And we said, where's your guys? Oh, it's just me. He goes, put this tape in. I had to put the tape in. So it basically is karaoke. And he gets up on stage. Now, remember who our crowd is. Country music, their crowd is 16 to 25 in 1991. And they're wanting to dance. They came out there to dance. And he gets up there and he does 2 or 3 of the most obscure Elvis songs, like Latest Flame is one of them. And I don't even like that song that much. And he does 2 or 3 of them. And before he does it, this is the coup de grace here. The white guy gets up there and finally gets to shine in the light himself. And he introduces him. And he has this long soliloquy. And it's like he's reading, Dostoevsky or something. He just keeps going on and on and on and on for 5 minutes talking about how great this guy is, right?
I got a question. I think others listening might have this question. Why are you calling his handmaid there? Why are you calling him white guy? What?
Well, because here's the reason why. I wanted to describe him, an older white man. Okay, unmarried, nothing to do, no grandkids. I figured it out after the long spell when he introduced him, what this was.
Uh-oh.
This was a, kind of a quasi-homosexual attraction type thing that he had for him. I'm sure it wasn't reciprocal, but people can live vicariously through other people. If you have somebody that's high egotistical and somebody beside them going, yeah, you're great, he's going to keep him around because no one else is doing it.
I need somebody like that.
Well, I would be very tiresome of that. So,
not me.
Well, okay,
Scott, you ate all those hot dogs like a champ. Yeah, I know.
Well, you're right. The intimate vocal, stroking was on display that night when he was introing him, and it got sickening after about 5 minutes. So,
dude, I want to see this so bad. I would go tonight to see this sycophant gay dude introducing his buddy.
Right.
That's dressed like Elvis singing from a cassette tape. I want to go. You're selling it.
Right. So about 3 minutes into the speech, right, which is mesmerizing, 3 minutes into it, right, it reminded you of Gettysburg Address or something. But 3 minutes into it, the crowd is like, play some music, all this sort of shut up. And, it's out of hand already. So he does the song.
So did white guy put up his hand with a kerchief to hush the crowd?
He just kept talking. He charged through it. And finally, after he was done with the 2 songs or 3 songs, it was an eternity. But, it got the sexual chocolate clap, right? Like 2 or 3 of them, right? And for those of you who don't know, the movie Coming to America, the sexual chocolate scene, where he gets 2 or 3 people clapping. But yeah, so it was like that.
I have a great suspicion that a huge preponderance of my audience knows sexual chocolate.
Okay, good. So they'll get the reference. But yeah, that's what it sounded like. So he goes to Ralph. He goes, "Hey, that went really, really great, Ralph." And we're like, Ralph told me this. I didn't see this part. And Ralph goes, I think we'll pass on this. He said, "Do you don't have a band?" Or, "No, it's just me. Like an hour, we do I do 8 or 10 songs and then take a rest." And I'm like, I don't see an audience for it. And Ralph asked me, he goes, "Do you see an audience for this?" And I said, "Absolutely not." They'd get up and walk away in a graveyard on this. I was like, no way, man. This is terrible. And so the follow-up to this, real quickly, I had a landscape business for 30 years. I don't know if you knew this or not, but I had a landscape business. And in 1998, I go to this older woman, and she owns a lot of land. I'm not going to give her name away because that's his name. She owned Ranchwood Manor. He's from a rich family. He owned Ranchwood Manor, street named after the family. You don't have to reiterate it. That my grandfather actually lived on. She had this big house and this field behind that she wanted an estimate on. And I recognized her last name. And I went over there and I told her who my grandfather was, who knew the family quite well. And we got into a nice discussion. And I'm sitting there talking to her. Now, this is 1998. This is 7 years later. Okay? And in walks Elvis. And okay, I'm not going to say his name. It's really hard to do this. And I'm doing this because I don't want to embarrass him. So he walks in and he's still doing him. And he remembers me. And
I love it.
he says, "Hey Ross, how you doing?" And I said, hello. I wanted to say you're still doing this, and he's 40 something and living with grandma. And I was like, this act didn't get you a woman and get you married with 3 kids. I can't figure out why. Right. So anyway,
Maybe it's a white dude.
right. Well, I think he was long gone. But anyway, so there's these 2 giant swords they have in the living room that cross over for decor. And he pulls one off. He goes, "Not only do I do this, I'm an expert with a sword." And he names the name for it, which I really don't remember. Like a marksman is with a gun. I don't remember what the sword guy is. But anyway, he starts swinging it around in the living room, right? And she goes, "Put that down. You're going to hurt somebody with that." And he puts it down and he goes, "Better listen to grandma." And I was like, "Oh, where are you at? Where are you, dude?" It's like
go.
early 40s, dressing like Elvis. And dang the day,
I want to go.
I'm not
Ross,
joking.
quit selling. I want to go. I want to see white dude. Introduce him. I want to say, "Hey, Elvis impersonator, where can I get some concessions?" And I want him to do that karate kick and with both hands, "Over there, young man." I want to go.
Oh, he did do that with one of the songs on stage too. And he did the hi-ya thing or something. And I was just like, "Oh my God, this is terrible." I'm watching Ralph that night, and Ralph's like, if you've ever seen the scene from Purple Rain where Billy, the club manager, sitting there staring at Prince on stage with a cigarette. That's what it looked like. And, when Prince is doing Computer Blue and screwing it all up.
Yeah.
And Ralph's just looking at him just like that, like Billy did Prince, going, "Oh my God, we got to get this guy."
Dude, what a great way to end this. And you mentioned King Creole, the greatest Elvis song ever sung.
Right. I mean, he had a combination of all 3. He was
like a catfish on a pole.
Right. Exactly. When he walked across the floor, he had that, have a wooden floor, and there's no other resonating noise in there, or ambient noise. And he's got the step, and he's doing his shoulders when he's walking, right? Like the special, this is Elvis.
King.
Like he's walking into a casino in Vegas, and he's like doing that. And I was like, this isn't real, right? I mean, because when he left, I said, was this a joke or a prank or something you organized, right?
You were an accomplice, man. You played the cassette tape. You knew what this was.
When he handed me the tape, I'm like, what? Because I didn't even know the term karaoke at the time, to be honest with you. I didn't know. I wasn't connected to that, but I was like, oh my God. I said, he's going to sing from music. Hope he really sings, right? I hope this isn't what, I was afraid it was going to be lip sync, which would have been the worst. That's the worst. Besides playing air guitar contest, doing lip syncing is the worst form of entertainment in the history of mankind.
Dude, I'm going to tell you, if he had a little merch table and he sold plastic, taking care of business, lightning bolt necklaces,
TCB in a flash.
Yeah, I would have bought 3 of them.
I just expected him to just start saying Sunny and Red, to us. I was just like, I guess the old guy thought he was Tom. Now to think about it, maybe he thought he was Tom Parker. I don't know. But
I don't either. But all I could think about when you mentioned that was that HBO Liberace movie from like 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where his little sidekick there would introduce him.
Right. That's what happened.
That's what I kept thinking about.
And the dude was reading it off a pamphlet too. And I thought, he goes, well, I got an intro for him. And the way he suggested it, I was like, oh, okay. Like, ladies and gentlemen, the king or something, right? I thought 8, 10, 12 words, right?
Yeah.
Dude had 1,200 or something. It was just like every great once in a while, someone comes along and it's like, oh, Jesus, because it's going to be like one of these deals, right? So it was just like the guy did not practice, the soul of wit, as Shakespeare described as brevity.
Right.
So he was not in on that. So it was very difficult to get through, but it's also one of the funniest, moments in my life, not just the
Dude,
dying.
if you have ever sold anything, it is this concert. I'm telling you, I would go tonight.
Well, he's probably still doing it somewhere.
I'd go to his grandma's house to watch a sword display in the living room.
Well, he probably inherited everything, so he's got a big house to practice in. I don't know what
if his name is the name of your grandpa's street, I know his name now.
You're right. I'll tell you off this, but yeah, that's his last name.
Shares a surname with a famous basketball player.
Yes, and a famous television show about 6 kids. That's his first name. So
nice.
So,
dude, thank you so much. This was great fun. And look, I know there's more stories lurking. We'll have you on again. And
if I can think of some more that would make people interested, I'll let you know. There's tons of them that are just so blasé that wouldn't, it was like Kramer's stories on Seinfeld. I mean, there's so many of them.
Those aren't your stories. Kramer, those aren't your stories.
Well, these aren't even good Peterman stories, so I wouldn't even try and sell them for you.
Ross, thanks so much for your time, bud.
Appreciate it, Scott.
All right, bud.
All right, that's it. Ross is out the door. It's just us. He's probably kicking himself for forgetting about that time REO Speedwagon's drum tech was served papers for child support. Some kind of nonsense. We need more of those stories. If you have any follow-up questions or if there's anything you wanted to know about that place, send them on. We're on Facebook and X, and welcome the feedback. I'll get them to Ross, and we'll get you the answer. Season 2 is underway. Thanks for your continued support. We're going to spread out a little bit this season and tell more general Gen X stories with some interaction, but not before I introduce the listeners to one of the wildest years of middle school I've ever heard of. Buckle up. That one's coming up soon, and it's pretty nutty. New episodes on Friday or whenever we feel like it.